All right, friends, good morning and welcome to the 4th Annual Geopolitics of Technology in East Asia Conference. My name is Andy Grotto. I founded and co-direct the program on geopolitics, technology, and governance here at Stanford. We've held this conference annually since 2022, thanks to generous support from the Korea Foundation. Thank you, Cheng-shik, to you and your colleagues in Seoul and Jeju for making this conference and the ones before it possible. We held the third convening of this conference just over 1 year ago, in the week before the US presidential election. Lots happened since then. Korea, Japan, and the United States have new leaders. Korea experienced a coup. Taiwan held recall elections driven in significant part by populist sentiments about the current opposition party's relationship with mainland China. Political polarization continues to be a significant force in democracies around the world. On the technology front, the Chinese AI company DeepSeek ringed in the new year with its efficient and advanced R1 algorithm. TSMC continued to churn out essential and extraordinarily advanced chips, but also shipped chips to China in violation of US export controls. The leading AI labs released improved models against a $1 trillion backdrop of investments in data centers. China implemented new export controls on rare earths. NVIDIA reached a market cap of $5 trillion. The outgoing Biden administration issued an executive order on AI with trust and safety as animating principles and published a sweeping new AI diffusion framework for controlling the export of AI models and semiconductors. The new Trump administration promptly rescinded the EO and replaced it later in the summer with an AI action plan that emphasizes diffusion and dismisses safety risks. The current administration scrapped the AI diffusion framework, cut major chip export deals with Gulf states. The president got a new plane in the process. It put export controls on a key NVIDIA chip used for inference, only to have the president himself personally reverse it later by tweet. Oh yeah, and a trade war broke out. So that's a non-exhaustive list of major happenings since this time last year. It's dizzying, and my hope is that the 4 panels we have today will help orient us. The technologies we'll discuss today, AI, advanced semiconductors, the computing infrastructure that powers them, are not merely tools of economic competition. They're reshaping the very foundation of national power, redefining the terms of international cooperation, and forcing governments around the world to make consequential choices about their economic and national security futures. The title of our conference deliberately emphasizes geography. East Asia is not simply one theater among many in the global technology competition, it is the theater. This region is home to the world's most sophisticated semiconductor manufacturing, the most dynamic AI ecosystems outside the United States, and some of the most complex geopolitical relationships on Earth. What happens in East Asia will determine whether the 21st century sees a fragmented technology landscape divided by geopolitical fault lines, or whether new frameworks for cooperation emerge that bridge profound strategic differences. So let me frame the central tension that animates today's discussions. On the one hand, technology development and deployment are inherently global endeavors. The semiconductor supply chain spans dozens of countries. AI models are trained on data from around the world and deployed across borders. Innovation thrives in the free exchange of ideas, talent, and capital. On the other hand, technology is inextricably linked to national security, economic sovereignty, and geopolitical competition. AI is making these linkages stronger and more urgent. This tension is obviously playing out in real time, and nowhere more dramatically than in the relationship between the United States and China. But the story is not simply one of bipolar competition. The other countries at the heart of today's discussion, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, are not passive observers or mere proxies in someone else's contest. They're sophisticated actors with their own interests, their own technological capabilities, and their own complex relationships with Washington and Beijing. Understanding their perspectives is essential to understanding where the technology competition is headed and what possibilities exist for managing it constructively. Our first panel examines how governments are approaching the fundamental challenge of AI governance, which is how to accelerate AI adoption and innovation while managing risks and aligning deployment with national values and priorities. The Trump administration's AI action plan has signaled, I think it's fair to say, a distinctly American approach, one that prioritizes diffusion and takes a very laissez-faire approach to diffusion. But America's partners in East Asia face different political economies, different regulatory traditions, and different social contracts with their citizens. How are they navigating these trade-offs? Are some better positioned than others to reap AI's benefits? And critically, what does the divergence in national approaches mean for the prospects of international cooperation on AI governance? The second panel turns to the substrate of the AI age, computing power. If AI is reshaping the world, then advanced semiconductors and the manufacturing equipment that make those chips possible to manufacture are choke points in that transformation. Export controls have become a primary tool of technology competition, but they're also deeply disruptive to established patterns of trade and cooperation. We'll explore the logic behind recent US policy shifts, examine whether allies share Washington's strategic calculus, and consider how China perceives and responds to these dynamics. This conversation will force us to grapple with hard questions about the relationship between economic interdependence and national security in an age of strategic competition. Our third panel steps back to examine the larger strategic context. In Washington, there's a broad consensus, at least outside of the Oval Office, that the United States faces a generational competition with China with technology at its center. Do America's allies see the world the same way? This panel will give us insight into how regional actors are thinking about their options and what they want from their partnerships with the United States and China. Finally, our fourth panel addresses economic security in the Trump 2.0 era. In recent years, friendshoring has emerged as a conceptual framework for thinking about supply chain resilience. The idea that trusted partners could work together to reduce vulnerabilities and dependencies on geopolitical rivals, including by cultivating synergies with each other's manufacturing ecosystems. The Trump administration's enthusiastic embrace of tariffs, including against allies, has complicated this picture. What does economic security mean now to American partners when the United States itself is a source of economic uncertainty? And what does friendshoring mean when friends erect trade barriers? These four panels trace an arc from the specific to the systemic, from questions of technology governance to fundamental questions about order, alliance, and trust in the international system. The conversations we'll have today matter not only because they illuminate policy challenges, but because they'll help us understand whether the technology revolution will be a force for fragmentation or a catalyst for new forms of cooperation. I want to close with a reminder of what's at stake. The decisions that governments take in the coming years about technology development, deployment, and governance will shape economic opportunity for billions of people. They'll determine whether the benefits of artificial intelligence are widely shared or narrowly concentrated. They will affect the military balance of power and the prospects for peace and stability in this region and beyond. And they'll influence whether we can build international institutions and norms capable of managing technologies whose power and implications we're only beginning to understand. This is urgent, consequential work. I'm grateful to all of our panelists for sharing their expertise, and I'm grateful to all of you for being here. To kick things off with our first panel, I'd like to invite Martin Chorzempa to the stage. Martin is a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics and one of the smartest voices in Washington that I know on technology and finance in China. Martin, over to you.
All right. So thank you all for coming. It's just a great topic and a great group of people here today. Just to set the stage a little bit on this subject of AI diffusion. It's interesting that we have a panel of Korean and Japanese participants, but when we think about AI today, one of the most striking things we see is if you look at, for example, the rankings of the top AI models in the world from Artificial Analysis, which pulls together kind of a composite look at intelligence across many different domains, you see that the top 20 models have one model that's not American or Chinese. And that's a European Mistral. There's nobody else who competes there. So for other countries, there's essentially a choice of, do you try to compete with the United States and China building your own frontier model, or do you choose Chinese models? Do you build on top of them? Do you sign a deal with OpenAI or Anthropic or Grok or something else and work with them? Or do you do some mix of the two? And that's also a real fundamental challenge for the regulation of this area, because if you are a country like In East Asia or anywhere, you have a limited ability to influence what actually is developed in the model. So these are some of the tensions that we're going to get at today. And also, as Andy mentioned, it's just very early for this technology. So knowing exactly what regulatory approach to take is going to be a real challenge. So we have great panelists today. I'll invite the panelists up to the stage to grab a seat. Starting with, we'll pull up the bios. Starting with Ichikawa-san, who is a specially appointed professor, Center for Data Science and AI Education, Institute of Science in Tokyo, will provide a Japanese perspective. Sejin Kim, who is Associate Director of the Center for Korean Innovation and Competitiveness at ITIF, the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. She's based in Seoul. And Ahram, who's Research Fellow at the Korea Information Society Development Institute. For the panel today, we're going to go into three different areas. We're going to start with the technology side, looking at just kind of setting the stage for each country. How is AI affecting each country's economy and society? How is it being diffused? What are the strategies? Then we're going to go into regulation and then conclude with kind of the implications there for multilateral cooperation. So to start with you, Ichikawa-san, on the technology side. How do you see AI currently being developed in Korea? Is there a sense that you can, in Japan, do you see an ability to potentially try and compete in foundation models, or is it, what models are being diffused? What are you seeing?
Okay, thank you very much for my introduction. And as for the technology side in Japan, so of course, as with the same with other advanced countries, Japan is trying to promote the AI technologies. But in reality, I understand most of the Japanese industry understand they are very much difficult to compete with, for example, United States AI big tech companies like OpenAI or Google or something. But mostly Japanese industry are rather focused on the Japanese language model for developing for the use of the, especially for the Japanese users, and that's one thing. And the other thing is so it was very difficult to compete with the U.S. AI big tech companies. So they are now, I found that they are now trying to have a close relationship with the OpenAI AI big tech company of the United States, like OpenAI or Anthropic or these kind of things. So what their strategy is more, they use the kind of use of the AI frontier model of the United States, but they try to diffuse their technology to the Japanese industries, especially for the users of the Japanese industries. And also there is innovative startup AI companies is also there, but it is still small. But they are now trying to more promote a kind of the new kind of the model which should be. That's a whole story of the Japanese AI technology situations.
So would you say that it's kind of focused on the application layer? You take a foundation model from the U.S., build an application. Where are you seeing them be applied in Japan today? Where are they having impact?
I understand. Of course, they are trying to create their own AI frontier model, but mostly they are focusing on the application. Application is more, they have an advantage. They think they are advantage.
Makes sense. Thank you. So, Sejin, can you give us the view from Seoul?
Yeah, I think across the East Asia, I think we generally see government-led diffusion model, AI diffusion model, and then Korea is not exception. If the U.S. is experiment first and then just later, but Korea also set the national goal first, and then coordinate and then roll out these steps. And then there's a huge debate about the sovereign AI. So should Korea trying to develop frontier models, foundation models, or should we just focus on like a Japan application or middleware or something we can do better than now? So there's still, the debate is still going on that. One example was recently NVIDIA was decide to use investment to Korea government. So it's more 280,000 GPUs NVIDIA is going to provide to Korea first. And then government is now coordinate how divide the GPUs now. And then it's not fixed yet, but they announced they are still discussing, but they decide mostly, almost decide that 50,000 GPUs goes to national foundation model because the Jae-myung Lee administration, their catchphrase was they're very focused on AI-driven model, and then they believe they more prefer the sovereign AI, that concept. So that's why they're trying to build up their frontier model now. And then rest of them, they also have a debate, should we divide to big companies who can more potentially get bigger, or should we divide to startups more, spread the startups more, so equally it should be divided. There's a big debate now going on now. And then other than also there's a called AI highway policy. So governments decide to invest $7 billion to AI industry, but include indirect policy as well. So it's very big debate. Sovereign AI is a big debate.
It's really interesting you mentioned this NVIDIA deal and that Korea has this ambition because it's even a smaller economy than Japan.
Yeah.
And if we look at the requirements to train frontier models, they've been going up on average something like 4x per year. So the kind of clusters that you're talking about that Korea is looking to build may be competitive from a couple generations ago, but it seems like it's going to be a real challenge. Do you think Korea is really grappling with the fact that the scale to actually be at the frontier would require probably orders of magnitude more investment? And if not, are they okay with maybe a much less capable frontier model, but as long as it's sovereign, then we think that's worth the trade-off?
Well, I would say, sovereign AI, if because they are government, they have to think about security, so it's having a foundation model would be nice, but there's given that the very limited resource and then the timing, I would say maybe focus on middleware or application that can Korea do better. I think finding that part is more effective way to lead the AI industry for Korea. And I do see physical AI also very potential field for Korea. Because, there's a lot of they have strong bases, manufacturing bases. And then NVIDIA also, is already made Samsung and Hyundai. So I think Korea is very potential of that. But there's a lot of challenges. MPU, have to develop MPU, and then there's a lot of challenges too. But automation and then robotics, the field is very potentially Korea to do better than.
Great, thank you. So Dr. Moon, you've done work looking at kind of the more social implications and other things on AI. How are you seeing the impact of AI in Korea now?
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here to talk about some AI policies, especially with the Korea economy perspectives. Well, for decades, actually, Korea's success was built on like an imbalanced and short-term catch-up innovation model. So we concentrate our resources to in key sector like ICT. So we became a very fast followers, but that model allowed us to escape actually the middle income trap. But this model actually now reached out its outer limit. It already exhausted. Well, it has left us like a big challenges, like a structural bottlenecks. First is economic crisis. We actually face with like a severe productivity imbalance. On our model led to like a two-track economy. So we have a hyper competitive and leading ICT sector, but the other sector, which is non-ICT sectors, productivity has very stagnated. And this imbalance is now dragging into our entire national growth potential. The second part is actually social crisis. Well, you probably heard about our issues is the demographic cliff with the world lowest birth rate, and also we have a large portion of the aging population. So this is happening alongside with like a deeply dualized labor market in Korea. So creating immense of social dispute or anxiety. So, and third is that these two types of crisis, the economic and social crisis, led us to the political crisis, which is called extremely polarization. So when growth is low and the labor market becomes a zero-sum game, and the society turns on itself, like so we observe a decline in social trust, and also we observe a lot of like conflict with political polarization last year, especially after the martial law in Korea. So basically at this stage, AI can be, well, for us, can be like an engine for the growth model. Like this is a chance to rebuild on our innovation model from imbalanced short term to balanced to long term. So that's why Korean government is actually focusing on just AI for this at this stage, I think. So it means balanced is in the sense that productivity gains diffuse across the entire economy, not only ICT, but also non-ICT sector. And it means the long term is that in the sense that we move from the, like, not only just to stay in the fast followers, we want to like a technology leader to like other countries. So that's why we are focusing on like originality or creativity in this sector. Yeah, the other issues, but I really want to point out that at this point, although Korean government is actually very focusing on AI policy to economic growth, but there is also downside. I would like to highlight that this link between the technology and growth can be broken through the labor market. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with this dispute is that globally, we expect that very huge gap expectation for AI. We have a different side. So on one hand, if you have an optimistic forecast, like global stocks who estimate global economy from the AI, they actually forecast almost 15% GDP boost over next 10 years after generative AI. But on the other hand, if you are probably familiar with Daron Acemoglu, who are from the MIT and got Nobel Prize last year, and he actually estimates the real world gain from AI might be a modest or minimal. Like he actually estimates almost 1.6% over next 10 years. If conditional on is that AI only used to like displace the labor, not just augmented it. So I would like to emphasize that this is not just academic debate. I think this is a center for vulnerability for our global economy. So this transition from tech-led growth can be weaken the labor market. Then this could be a risk part in Korea either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, a really important point that you raised. I mean, as I'm an economist, and so it's like catnip when someone starts talking about economic forecasts to me. And the real challenge that I think anyone faces looking at this in terms of what's the impact going to be, which then is the key input to the policy debate, is that you go all the way from Acemoglu, who's a Nobel Prize winner, who estimates essentially less impact on the economy than a fax machine, to people saying we're going to have this incredible world of deflation and autonomous everything, and we'll all be in Marx's version of the world where you can be a fisherman and a theater critic, and everything will be fine. And then because it's so wide, you have no idea then what to plan for unless you just sort of put it in the middle and say, okay, it's going to be 10%. So that's definitely a real challenge. So I want to shift to, are we seeing impacts already on the economy and society in Japan and Korea now? Ichikawa-san, you mentioned that Japan is building up applications. Are these at the point where they're already beginning to change things in terms of competition between firms? Is it already beginning to impact at all the labor market in Japan? In the U.S., we have the first kind of evidence coming out of Stanford, actually, that canary in the coal mine, that maybe it's beginning to affect younger graduates in more AI-impacted areas. But also there's a sense that maybe the economy is just overall not that good. Maybe that's the driver. So there's so much fog. Do you see any clear impact so far that's kind of maybe putting pressure on the government to react in any way?
Okay, it's an interesting question, and frankly saying, Japan is now, trying to, promote the AI and try to, deploy the AI in the Japanese society. But the reality is not, it's very, I can say, slow to compared with the United States. And so they are not trying to, use, for example, generative AI, but comparatively speaking, so Japan is, relatively low in the deployment of AI compared with other advanced countries. So maybe there are some reasons for this slow deployment of the Japanese industry. One is there are also some kind of structural problem that most of the Japanese companies to to try to keep their own technology. But the other point, what I am personally thinking is that Japan is very much aged population. So old people are not keen, don't want to try to use AI or this kind of emerging technology. That's one of the slow points that the reason. So, and also as for the populations, most of the business want to use AI technology because there are labor shortage in Japan. So many companies trying to use AI for so there's a labor shortage in Japan. So they are trying to use AI technology, but it doesn't cause the kind of the layoff or these kinds of things. That's one of the another structural issue is in Japan is that they will not fire the employees just because of the they want to use the technology. There, it is prohibited by the custom law of the labor. So it is. So they want to cooperate with the employees to use. That's a different part of the Japanese AI issues.
Okay, so it sounds like it's very early and lots of time for the regulation that we're going to talk about in the next part to have an impact before it begins to impact the economy. So Sejin, how about in Korea? I mean, one of the most interesting statistics I've seen recently is that Korea actually has the second largest population of paid GPT users in the world. And if you think about the gap in capability between the paid version and the unpaid version of this, it seems like Korea, despite such a small population, being probably one of the largest populations in the world with an actual ability to understand the frontier of what AI can do today. Are you seeing more impact, or is it similar to Japan, where we haven't really moved in that direction yet?
I think it's very similar to Japan. There's not any significant movement yet. But I mean, you mentioned the second largest customer base on ChatGPT in Korea. I think this pattern, Korean people is more very digital friendly, and then it's very good for adoption. It's a good place for adoption for global company as well. So I think there's a pattern. Patterns appeared crypto section as well, and the mobility. Every time emerging tech came, the industries start came out, then Korea is very, adoption is very good, went too fast. But yeah, but still a lot of impact around the social impact. We still talk about, job. AI taking our job. That concerns a lot of concerns. But I think it's compared to U.S. Security and job, the impact of AI is more. It's less, not much talking about. There's not much big main direction.
Okay. You have, Dr. Moon, you have a view?
Yeah, I can add her point is that actually she talked about a lot of AI policy, government policies as the first our remarks. And when people look at South Korea's AI policy, mostly if you are familiar or you are like interested in, you may only see the policy part of a top 3 AI power for Korea. This is very huge goal for government goal. But there is another equally important pillar for Korean AI policy. We call this AI basic society. This is more likely to adoption or implementation part of AI in Korea. So I understand the reaction from both a goal of governance, top 3 AI power and AI basic society. Top 3 goals sound like it's too large and too catch-up race, but still that makes us push or build the next big LLM. But if you consider AI basic society, we need some big LLM, not depend on rely on heavily on international LLM or ChatGPT or Claude. As we mentioned, ChatGPT in Korean users is the largest second in ChatGPT and also the thirdest in Claude model actually. So it's pretty, both model we have a lot of people already rely on, and those kind of not domestic but international service from the ChatGPT. So probably this AI basic society policy about it is try to people who don't left behind from the pricey or some price model from the some private international firm. Yeah, that's what I understand that. Yeah,
that's interesting. It's if you're paying for the model,
right.
Clearly you have to have the resources to do that.
Yeah.
But then you also don't want to leave people behind who can't pay for the model. So that's a real challenge. The view on when to regulate and what kind of regulation has taken form in Japan. You've written about the approach so far with the AI Promotion Act. What do you see?
Okay. In general speaking, so Japan has a kind of in general has an orientation for the promote innovations, and actually Japan is one of the first test country which introduced the AI technology strategy, which was firstly established in the 2017, and. As for the regulation or the governance issues, so most Japanese government have long been have the orientation for the so-called soft law approaches, which is a kind of the government issues guideline, which is not binding guidelines, and recently, so with this. Global interest on the AI governance, so Japanese government have proposed the Japanese new AI Act, which was proposed in this February and passed the diet in May and in force in this September. And this AI Act is a kind of the basic law, and it does not include kind of the what hard law regulations, or there's no obligation for the industries, and there are no penalties for the industries. So as for the governance issues, they stress always issues software, so-called software law approach is what we have been followed. It's described, Japanese government have to, publish the guidelines of these kind of things. But another point, this law is pointing out is that the kind of what we can say that agile governance approach. That means we don't regulate in advance for as a kind of the precautionary principle, but we find the government have to, correct the incident and positively and find what is happening and then take measures for, to this regulation. That kind of the framework was written in the AI Act. That's the kind of the Japanese approach for the AI risks or the AI governance.
Okay, that sounds a lot like, in some senses, China's approach to many different emerging technologies, where they essentially say, we want to develop it, we're not going to set the regulatory framework yet, we want to wait and see how things have worked. Sejin, you've been pretty scathing in your review of Korean approach in this space, and obviously disagreement and spiciness is the key ingredient to any successful panel. So can you tell us what is Korea's approach and what is misguided about it?
Yeah, I think it's Korea's, the AI regulation in Korea is sort of between EU and the US. And then Korea passed AI. Korea is the second country who passed the second AI comprehensive law after EU passing. And then it's called the AI Framework Act. And it's going to take effect next January. And then the enforcement decree, the details comes out. They are planning to this year, end of this year, or it's January, early January. But that law is combined. That's very unique law. So it's combined the strategy, promotion, and then regulation in one single statute, one single law. And then I was quite impressed. Over 60% of law is more approach to promotion and then strategy side. Also, they control tower, including control tower, which is very important in Korea governance system. But it's the actual effect. But it's really depends on the details. It's gonna be comes out of December, because but there's a lot of debate about high impact AI. So how high impact AI and then labeling and watermarking and then grace period will be defined. So yeah, because there's a proposal to tie to risk to compute size, and then it's compute size one of the standards to define high impact AI. But the compute size, Hodan and I argue this our report as well. Compute size is not the best way to define the risks, because companies, they're gonna optimize their threshold anyway. So yeah, keeping arguing, but it's protection of SMEs is very important concept for Korean government. So it's still debating.
That's interesting, because the U.S. Initially in the Biden administration was very focused on compute thresholds as well in its regulation. The EU is kind of more focused on the application layer. So you think that their desire to set it there was due to trying to protect SMEs that are small, but the SMEs might be using a big model, right? So do you just think that approach of using compute caps is fundamentally misguided? And do you have an idea of how would you better define what AI we should actually already be kind of regulating at a much higher level versus others? Do you think it's capability of the model or the sensitivity of the area? Maybe you think that the existing regulatory approach in some sector would already cover it. I mean, what's your sense?
Yeah, so personally, I don't agree the size-based model, size-based regulation can define real harm. So I like to emphasize two things. Because Korean government should consider, I mean, it's not, the core question is regulate or not. I mean, the important question is a sequence. So diffusion first, and then observe the real harms, and then regulate with the evidence. That's what I'm emphasizing now. And then because we don't, so AI is going fast, the industry going fast, and then Korea has not much, the industry is still growing now, so we don't have whether frontier model or application is not good or not, we're still debating. So for now, grace period is very important for farm, is very important because it's not, there's no direction yet. And then, yeah, we don't want to use regulate imagined risk. We should risk that we saw when the real harm risk. And then the second one is consistency. If the regulation is included in East Asia as well, if the regulations comes from 5 different agencies, 5 different countries in different direction, then the compliance cost goes up, and then the market will be isolated. So it happens already. I mean, digital asset or mobility is now emerging tech because regulate first. So there's no space industry is going up. So I would like to emphasize 2 things.
Dr. Moon, do you agree that we should that Korea should wait until there's a big problem and then regulate there, or it seems or are you more advocating for an approach that tries to regulate more preventatively, and do you think that the compute caps maybe make sense?
Well, I would like to share some 2 experience from when I participated in AI ethics policy in Korea. So in Korea, we had a very prominent startup we called AI chatbot startup, and they actually committed some issues with data issues, privacy issues. So before, at the time, the problem is that there is no ethics guideline for those startups. So they are very the firms normally startup size is very small, or they try to fast and catch up for their goal is very clear always. So for them, it's really hard to make some ethical guideline themselves. So at the time, government decided to we have a law to how do I say, guide them or make some a good example and show them something like that. And so at the time, the government actually took that position to make some guideline for those kind of SMEs actually. But so that's my first experience about that. I think sometimes after regulation, I mean the event first and after regulation, that could be late because our data is already exposed to that issues what happened, and also that actually hurt to firms' profits, because that startup actually actually got a lot of penalties about that, but successfully actually after the government actually really helped to that startup actually, because this is good example how this startup recovered from that issues with the ethical challenges to be supported by government, and they actually recovered their own profit, and they now actually they launched the second version of a chatbot, AI chatbot, and they are still going on. So I think that's a good example for in AI regulation part. And the second experience I'm actually doing now about the AI basic law actually. After the passed the AI basic law, after that we also have to make some like sub-law for AI basic law, because this is very like a big law. There's no details. So this year we are trying to make some details about that. So when we talked about like firms in Korea, whether or not they agree with the concept of AI basic law, at least they agree with that this basic law maybe like decrease the uncertainty of the regulation. So for entrepreneurship, it's important to like minimize those uncertainty in the economy. AI basic law probably helped us for them, like disappear the uncertainty from the regulation environment on global, at least in Korea.
Yeah, that's another challenging trade-off, right?
Exactly,
in terms of uncertainty, if you leave it unclear,
right.
But then if you regulate too much too early, it can be a big challenge as well. So Ichikawa-san, can you give us a sense, so thinking about the challenges of regulation in this space, kind of what I mentioned at the beginning of the panel was, if you don't have foundation models in your country, then your ability to actually regulate how the AI works at a fundamental level is limited, right? It's OpenAI and Anthropic are not going to train a new frontier model specifically for Japan, for example. So where does that leave regulators who are thinking about where to intervene in terms of regulation? If you can't regulate at that level, is the focus then on regulating the application of AI throughout Japan, for example, or is there still some desire and hope that there will be able to be regulation that affects how the models are done, with, of course, the risk that if the big models are not compliant, you just probably would be more likely locked out of those models rather than being able to change how they're trained?
As long as I understand, so I suppose, frontier model, so there's no discussion about, currently there's no discussion about the regulation for the frontier model. In last year, so at that time, so EU has implemented their EU AI Act and including the GPI regulations, which is regulation of the frontier, and Biden administration was some kind of dual use regulation for the dual use foundation model. So Japanese government was discussed the possibility of the regulation of the frontier model at that time. But the reason why they think about the regulation is a kind of the, it is because of the, what can I say, you have to, the regulation must be, comparative within across the country. So they are trying to, think about the, kind of the possibility of regulation from the model, but they decided that it will not include that, because so that the one of the reasons why Japanese government are not interested in the regulation of the frontier model is that, in general, so probably I understand that due to the cultural or societal difference, they are not much afraid of the AGI or these kind of things. So mostly, most of the people say that Japanese culture are more focused on the AGI or AI has an image of the Doraemon or the Astro Boys or these kinds of things. That's a good things. So they are not so much afraid of the AI in the future. So there are no momentum in Japan compared with the United States or European countries. They are not much afraid of the people think of it. That's one of the reasons. But on the other hand, so if you see the application side, there are many risks will be arise. For example, disinformation or for example, privacy issues or sometimes contents and copyright issues is very much is. So they want to try to to tackle this application side or each individual risks by the agile governance approach. So if we find there are many risks or incidents it will happen, they try to fix that problem. That's kind of the approach.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. You can have a more sectoral
yes, that's right.
regulation where you might already have regulation. Like we don't regulate databases today, but we regulate their application to specific areas. So that makes a lot of sense. So Sejin, how does that compare with Korea? Is Korea also not AGI-pilled in its policy making process? And do you think that in many of these cases the application-specific regulation in many of these sectors is already possibly sufficient, or do they need to be rethought in a time of AI?
I think the big issue is the AI Framework Act. I mentioned that it's more like an AI comprehensive law. It's not about more broad concept. It's more sector regulation. But personally, Korea should regulate AI with sector regulation and existing law, because health AI is plus AI, but the health application is already, their problem is already well known. And then, how to handle the data, and then how to connect, who can access the data. Those kind of things, the ministry, each ministry knows very well. Not AI committee, not AI committee. It's more should be regulated each sector ministry. Finance also. Finance. There's a finance AI. There's a lot of we talking about a lot of risk about finance AI. Then they should be regulated by financial law, not AI law. That's my opinion.
That's really helpful. Ahram, do you have a perspective on this? Do you think it should be AI specific, or do you think that this sectoral specific
It's really hard to choose between them, but because in
or
our
no, you don't have to choose.
Okay, thank you. So I was sectoral regulation is also very important and efficient way to regulate them. But one concern from bottom of my mind is that, in the digital economy, there is only not sectoral services. Sometimes finance and healthcare can be mixed. Mm-hmm. And then it's really hard if we only have a different sectoral law for Medicare and Medicare and finance part. It's really hard to which law should be regulated for each sector. So I think that is one of the feature of digital economy, and AI also have the same issues. So that's why sometimes it's really the government really needed to some control tower for all the regulations. Yeah.
That makes sense. If AI changes as industries as much as many people in Silicon Valley expect, then a lot of the previous regulation will not certainly be fit for purpose. Yeah. So I want to shift us into the final third section, which is on multilateral cooperation, and I'm going to go and kind of reverse the order a bit. So Dr. Moon, you've written in late 2024 about how the U.S. and Korea could work together on regulation. Since then, a couple things have happened. One of them being that the U.S. seems completely uninterested now in kind of multilateral fora for cooperation that could put restraints on AI. So if you compare the kind of international procedure that we had, looking at principles from the OECD and Paris and before, the change in the Trump administration is now very different. So do you still see room for Korea and the U.S. to collaborate bilaterally? And do you still see room for multilateral cooperation in this space?
Yeah, one thing I'm expecting about after the Trump AI action plan, I was kind of surprised that he actually emphasized reviving manufacturing and empowering worker, which is very important in Korea though. So the common narrative is that if you consider AI, especially in factories, it's just replaces labor, but it's not that only the story, I think. What I see, especially in Korea, is that I'm actually interested in physical AI. If we consider not my research, from the other research also about a lot of Korean economic papers actually worrying about the decline in labor share of incomes. I mentioned this is a leakage problem, that our labor income share is disproportionately caused by software capital, a software-based capital, rather than infrastructure-based capital. So if we consider AI just a software, it could be decline the labor share of income. But if we use AI through the physical AI, then it could be more equipment-based capital. Then we have a chance to increasing or stable of our labor income share. So that's why I'm expecting those physical AI through the manufacturing part. So I think the U.S. and Korea has one of the advanced economic countries, both are. So I think that economic part, we probably have find some good cooperation between two countries. But you also asked me what kind of multinational cooperation. For me, it's actually very interesting part about the labor part is that, this is the labor issues or some productivity issues is not actually, it's really hard to handle with it's only one country's issues. Well, to be honest, we are watching now is that it's a lot of value from the AI create actually concentrated in the very small scale of firms or big tech companies or some small number of countries at all. But this value actually is built on our global data or global resources or some kind of that. So hopefully, I think multilateral or something like that, we may have to talk about how we global cooperation or this benefit sharing. We actually, from the digital economy, talked about a lot of things like data dividend or robot tax, or sometimes we also basic income. But I don't know which alternatives can be worked for AI society. But still, we have to consider what kind of option we have or what kind of option it will be worked for benefit sharing for the next decades.
I think all those are going to be very difficult to get
right.
international agreement on, but definitely worth trying. Sejin, what do you see more concrete? We looked at labor a little bit more in that last one. What other areas do you see as places we could work together to face what are probably going to be pretty common challenges across our economies?
Yeah. Also mentioned physical AI. I mentioned earlier, physical AI is, NVIDIA's investment is good example for cooperation between the US and Korea as well. I do see physical AI is very potential area for cooperation. And then also in regulatory way, I think interoperability could be competitive advantage in East Asia, because East Asia is they link to the US through the security, and then they link to the China and then Southeast Asia through their supply chain and the market point. So if East Asia will have a consensus on AI, then could be very compatibility. But I'm not saying we should have same rule. I'm saying I like to emphasize is we should not to do differently. So conflicting is avoiding fragmentation is sometimes is more important than perfect alignment.
So that's a good segue to Ichikawa-san. Do you think that there could be, considering the many frictions between Japan and Korea that have made coordination across many issues challenging in the past. Do you think that there could be, I would first pose the same question to you, is there room at any way that you see full multilaterally, but if not, then do you see room for more synchronization and coordination and regulatory approaches between Japan and Korea, but also other countries? Like, do you see room to actually work with China in this space and create some sort of larger market where, in the US, one example that the administration is struggling with is that many states want to regulate, and then we might end up with this patchwork of 50 different regulatory regimes, which is just a mess. You clearly want, each of your countries are not as large as the US market or the Chinese market. Do you think that there could be room, considering that we've already seen that there's a big difference in the approaches, precautionary versus more open, between Korea and Japan?
So historically, or generally speaking, so Japan has focused on the kind of the interoperability of the AI governance within, I can say, like-minded countries, especially through the G7 process. And it is including the United States and also the European Union. But so the unique point of the Japanese position in G7 is that we are not the United States, and we are not EU. So United is an AI superpower. On the other hand, EU has a kind of strong Brussels effect, right? So Japan's position is, Japan has as I told you, it's a kind of software law approach. We don't have a rigid regulation, so it's very, I can say, more flexible. So Japanese the position is kind of neutral, and the position of the coordinating the G7 countries. So that's why I say the Japanese government have strongly play a role in the creating the OECD AI principle, and recently they are now reading the Hiroshima AI process and publish the International Code of Practice for the Frontier AI Models. So that's the main issues for the international regulation. So what we want to do is coordinate. It is okay for example, EU to make a EU AI Act, and at the Biden administration, it is okay to, for example, Biden administration make some kind of regulation. What we want is interoperability. It's the main issues for the Japanese government and the Japanese industry. That's the position of the Japanese industry. And now, so it began with the G7 countries, but it must not be only the code of conduct within the G7 countries. So Japanese government trying to expand this Hiroshima AI process to OECD countries, including the Korea, and now last year, so Japanese government had made a friends group of Hiroshima AI process. It includes ASEAN countries and also Africa, India also, and some African countries. That's a kind of the Japanese government strategy for the internationally. So as I say, Japanese government is more flexible about the contents of the regulation, but what we want to do is international interoperability of the AI governance. But I can say that China is not included so far.
That's really interesting. I know Japan has had this previous idea of data-free flows with trust, and trust essentially means not sent to China, but some other things as well. So I'd love to open it up to the audience. I think we have about 25 minutes left for questions. So hopefully all of you have found anything that we haven't addressed yet and can help us fill in any gaps with, sure, over there.
So, hi, thank you so much for the panel. Sorry for being late. I work in the tech industry, and I subscribed to this yesterday because I saw it. So just to understand how other people think. But the question is for you, since you mentioned it, because you speak like a tech bro.
Oh, God.
So let me tell you why. Why is so bad to have, I think that Section 230 was a disaster for the United States. The idea that anytime a company can claim, I am a platform, they're not liable for anything that happens. That's how Google, Facebook got. So at least the state approach allows for some experimentation as to, look, I don't like Gavin Newsom much, but I salute him that he has been signing things against. There was a proposal in 2006, this was in one of the frontline documentaries about Snowden, that there was a local, I think it's Senator Figueroa, if I forgot her name, she tried to regulate Google and essentially they killed the whole thing. This time it hasn't happened. So I think it's a positive development, and over time, the right will so-called emerge, as they say, and that will become the federal standard as opposed to shutting down all the state efforts. And what is your opinion on somebody?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it's interesting to look at, for example, the views of Dean Ball, who wrote the AI Action Plan and has generally been against many state regulations, but he actually came out in favor of the California law. So I think it's a really interesting time when essentially the federal government is unable to pass anything. When you do need some leadership, but there is a real problem if each state has their own individual regime. Now, if it's there's also it depends on what we're talking about. Like if they're trying to regulate how a foundation model is trained, and it makes it impossible to use the same model around, then that doesn't make sense. In other cases, they've said, don't discriminate, and that's made it hard for OpenAI to, for example, try to protect minors. So there are examples when this can backfire, and it needs to be thoughtful. And I think California is particularly well placed to put in sensible regulations, but maybe like Montana isn't necessarily going to come up with a really carefully thought through example. So it's really challenging, and the fact that the federal government is unable to, for example, have a privacy law in the United States after all this time is also a problem. Where but do the states trying to address this make it better or worse? I think it's really unclear. But I'm sorry, I talk like a tech pro. I'm from Washington.
Well, I'd like to ask our Korean and Japanese panelists, obviously the role of robots is going to be crucial not only in industry but in defense. So as you look into the next 5-10 year period and South Korea wants to build this AI superhighway, how much effort do you think the government will put into controlling, if possible, robots and autonomous weapons? I focus mainly on defense, and this is something that really worries me. I believe that robots, they won't run the Korean or Japanese self-defense forces, but if you look at demographics in Japan and Korea, they face enormous manpower shortages in their forces, and they're going to augment that with autonomous weapons. So how worried are you, and what are the safety or rail guards? Thank you.
Sure.
Okay.
Awesome. So
yeah, it's very difficult question. So, in generally speaking, so in the past, so Japanese defense forces is not so strong at technology, but now recently, so Japanese government trying to increase the funding for the defenses. In that course, the Japanese Defense Ministry also trying to promote the technology issue based on technology, and within that, so Japanese government or the Defense Ministry is trying to promote the AI. for the support different technologies. But what I am now understanding, it doesn't go to the AI robotics. So we are now studying about the drone, how to use the drones of these kinds of things. Of course, it's issues, but not much discussed about the AI robotics so much. On the other hand, so it's not the defense side. For Japan used to be strong at robotics. But now currently, what I understand is that robotics in China is very strong. And now the Japanese government are thinking about how to utilize AI for the robotics manufacturing and these countries. Now they're trying to begin a new strategy for the AI robotics of these countries.
Yeah, cybersecurity is important. I mean, I understand your concern, and then the part should be regulated. But the important thing is, I mean, I talked about already a sequence. So if we found the real harm, then we can regulate it. Observe, the sequence is a diffusion, observe, and then regulate. And then I would like to emphasize is the model is not the real harm, but we can regulate some actions and then the context. So if we don't want to, I mean, it's not regulating AI model, but we can regulate the access, who can access the data, who can handle the data, and then what responsibility goes whom. So, I mean, PII and personal information identification also is kind of very big topic in AI, especially nowadays. I mean, AGI is very, AI or AGI is very personalized. It should be very personalized and then customized. They give an answer, very personalized answer. Then they must use our very sensitive personal information. But now, technically, I heard it's not perfectly, they can separate the data between the trading data and the personal data. Of course, they can remove our sensitive data when they send to their training data server, but it's not perfect. So also, they can, I mean, there's not much regulation about who can access this level of data, the specific data. So I think we could be improved in that way. And then, actually, the cybersecurity things, usually the issues happen the third party or smaller SML as well. So we need to define the access and the responsibility on all of models, if not size-based model.
Yeah.
One thing I would like to add on is that probably it also leads to like international cooperation part, I think, about those cybersecurity issues or some robotics issues for like some defense issues. Is that this time is really important we have to build like some ethical assessment, impact assessment for globally, I think, because this is not because I'm an economist, but if we have the same like a framework to impact assessment, then it will be much easier to which system is more like a danger or which system is more impact on society or economy. If we have a consensus of that through this like a quantity or qualitatively, then we may have to easier to agree with how we react from this system, risky system, which system is more risky than others.
Hi, good morning. My name is Yang Fan. I'm an adjunct at Berkeley and also the executive director of the Institute for California AI Policy. My question is, do you think the rest of the world would follow this, if I can, this middle approach that Japan and Korea is leading, right? Because every almost every country's leader is thinking about, do we follow the European regulation model, or do we follow the European regulation model, or the more innovation-driven US model, right? I wonder if you have had conversations with leaders or peers in Latin America, in Africa, in Middle East. What are their receptions, or do they agree with you, or do they try to lean towards one way or another? Is there going to be just like a Brussels effect after GDPR? Is there going to be a Tokyo effect? Or Seoul effect? Thank you.
Great question. Yeah.
Okay, so as I said, Japanese AI Act has published this May, and we are now discussing about for example, other ASEAN countries or others. And I understand many ASEAN countries or the Asian countries are very much interested as a, kind of, as you said, it's a kind of middle approach. I understand many developing countries think that, for example, EU AI Act can be too much. But they need some kind of the framework for the regulating the AI risks caused by the risk. That was good. And we already we have a long, especially close relationship with, for example, Singapore or India, and we are closely discussing about these issues. But I understand Singapore is kind of very much similar with Japanese approaches.
Well, for me, when I looked at those kind of countries, like from the IMF paper, they actually compare for like advanced economy and also some developing economies. And they found that most AI exposed countries, advanced economy, relatively like Chile or Mexico, Chile or Brazil is less than exposed in AI. That means is that probably each developing country, their system is different from advanced economies actually. So if I have a chance, if I advise like for these developing countries, probably their economic system, if they want to really AI adopt and they want to be a much opportunity from AI, probably first is necessary is that they have to change their economic system to more exposed to the AI.
Thanks, guys. Great job. This is a question for you, Martin. You're a great thinker on all things China, and I'm wondering. You laid out 3 themes in your introduction for the panel to cover the national outlook on the status of the technology, approaches to diffusion, both on the innovation side as well as the guardrail side, then the outlook on international cooperation. Could you talk a little bit about how China sees this?
Sure, and we had an awesome roundtable organized by Graham Webster yesterday that addressed some of these issues, so it's like super fresh in my mind. It's very helpful. Yeah. So China is all in on diffusion at this point. The regulatory approach is very much focused on applications, and there's relatively little regulatory problems for Chinese companies that are developing AI models. And that has been one factor that has made them so competitive. They're put, for example, environmental concerns. They're now saying use domestic chips that are less efficient. We'll give you half off your electricity bill, which means that you're going to burn immense amounts of power. And they just don't care about the environmental impact of that compared to just being all in on development and diffusion. And I personally think that they're pushing too hard on that element of it. And we've seen that in the first half of this year, everybody was adopting DeepSeek because the government said, go out and adopt this, do it now. And now they're finding out that it doesn't necessarily work as well as they might have anticipated. And some of the cloud companies that overexpanded, thinking there was going to be this surge in demand, have been pulling back a little bit in the third quarter. But China runs these kind of campaign-style rules. They're not really good at being in the middle. So I actually think that the campaign style was diffuse and beat the United States, and that includes in the chip side, not needing to depend on the U.S. as much anymore. But there are going to be serious AI security risks, and when those materialize, I think China's going to change very, very quickly and clamp down at that point. They tend to just kind of vacillate between the extremes. But interestingly, in the international side, China is trying to position itself as the opposite of the United States, where they say, we are the open one. Our models you can just download for free. You can run them on whatever cloud you want. You don't need to pay the developers anything. And they're all super pro open source, which is kind of bizarre, because when we think about China, we don't think everything is open and uncensored and publishable. And you realize that those models can be stripped of their censorship when they are open weight and anyone can download them. But so far, there hasn't really been any sort of breach in the Great Firewall as a result of this, so they haven't decided to go back the other way. But I think they are really focused on, they want their models to be adopted all throughout the world, similar to how Huawei infrastructure was developed around the world, and they don't want to be encircled, where the entire rest of the world is using US models. And it's a real challenge to the United States, the fact that those models are available, in part because, as we were discussing a bit yesterday, if you can always download a Chinese model for free that's only a few months behind the top US models, then it's going to be more challenging for the US companies that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars or now into the billions to train a frontier model. And you try to charge enough to the users to be able to make back that money. If there's someone else that's available for free, or just the cost of compute, that is going to check your ability to maybe make that money back. So I think that Chinese revel in the current state of affairs. I was just at a conference in Shanghai that's supposed to be normally about economics and finance, and they had panel after panel after panel about how China's AI moment and breakthrough and how great everything is. They've gained a lot of confidence from their competitiveness in AI. And it could be that as the US pulls back from international cooperation in this space, in India, for example, to be very interesting coming up, it will be interesting to watch the role that China tries to play as trying to create what they also see themselves as saying, we don't want to be like the EU where we overregulate and have no AI as a result. And we also don't want to be like the US, which is just a complete free-for-all and a mess. And I think that they're going to be pretty influential in this space. Thanks for that softball. Sure.
So, Mike, I'm a visiting scholar here. My question is for Ms. Kim about timing of regulation. China may have a different scenario where they can put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. But if you enable a society to use these tools and explore with them, and then you try to regulate them after they find things that they like, do you see any challenges with trying to regulate and having the society push back and saying that you're limiting their options and they're not interested in that?
That's a good question. Thank you so much for asking. But yeah, I agree with the part of that. But Korea is not specific strong foundation model yet. Then there's not much strong industry yet. And then I'm saying it's not localization, is building strong localization app is not a good way. It's not gonna work, especially AIs. I mean, it goes across the board industry. So if you travel Korea now, then you have to use Naver Map, not Google Map. There's a lot of local apps. Messenger also is a local map, very local society. And then Naver and then Kakao, those kind of big tech screw government's protection. But AI I think this strategy is not gonna work. And then we need to encourage innovation more. I think that's the good AI strategy. That's the strategy Korean government need. Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for this panel. I'm Dennis Murphy, I'm a PhD candidate. Not to preempt the next panel, but it seems like the consensus has been a focus on applications, to not focus on large models with high amounts of compute. What do you think that might mean for geopolitical competition over the technical inputs of AI? So what is the view in Japan and Korea about export controls, for instance? is this something that is a priority at all in those countries, or is it just something that the U.S. is doing and you aren't entirely sure you get it, or just like whatever you think about that? Thank you very much.
Well, it's very interesting question is that Korean is actually focusing on to build our own LLM, like a big foundation model actually, because of not, it's as Sejin also mentioned that we already have a very independent digital services like not Google or not Snapchat. We have our own talk digital platform. So that experienced us if we have those kind of foundation model in Korean version, it's more helpful to build our ecosystem, like a business ecosystem based on this foundational model in Korea is much easier to our economic growth. That's why I think geopolitical competition, if we consider those competition, that would be very important. But one thing I really want to emphasize about is that in economics, we actually talked about global competition is matter, but if a decision maker should have to take care of their people. So that means that global competition, the result of a global competition should go to the people's wealth or people's well-being. So I think those kind of Koreans' perspectives to build on this LLM is for actually the people's wealth in Korea, I think, yeah. Not just competing for technology part.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I don't think that in Japan, so there's no discussions about, for example, import control of the frontier model of these countries. But it's a kind of competition. The Japanese government is also promoting the domestic countries to, research and development for the foundation model. But on the other hand, so there's no discussion about these issues, but now recently, so for example, the digital deficit with international trade is very increasing in Japan. So most of the money goes to the United States platformers. So there might be some issues in the future.
So I can address the export control question very briefly so I don't scoop the next panel. But Korea and Japan are in completely different positions in a really interesting way. So Korea produces HBM, which is actually a higher portion of the value of the NVIDIA chips than the dies that are produced by TSMC. But Japan doesn't produce any of the components of GPUs, but they make semiconductor manufacturing equipment, which is crucial. When the US came in 2022 trying to convince Japan to join the export controls on semiconductor manufacturing equipment, there was agreement on there's a security concern with China that we want to control, but there's a disagreement about the technical parameters. How far do we go? And that led the US to come out unilaterally and Japan and the Netherlands to come around later. And if you talk to people in Japan, you get a lot of information about how intense the pressure was from Washington to just get in line. And now a lot of the battle is around servicing, where the Japanese companies are legitimately concerned that if you suddenly pull servicing of the equipment that you've already sold, that's going to be seen in China as a huge provocation because they paid for the equipment. But then also the Chinese engineers that you've hired to help work on that will just start their own companies and service the equipment themselves, and they'll be replaced. So there's a disagreement about technical parameters and also about kind of what is the long game. I think there's a lot of disagreement among the other countries about whether the US is actually playing the long game, where I think so much of it was AGI, short timeline driven, where it's like, now is the crucial time, we need to hit every button to restrict China without recognizing that can strengthen them in the long term. And Korea has been impacted. Korea hasn't really been pressured, my understanding, as much to put their own controls on, because the US just said, we're going to extraterritorially use foreign direct product rule to control HBM. And so then you can't go there. But then as Korea takes advantage to some extent of the gap of not being controlled on the SME side, as they get better at SME and maybe compete more with Japanese firms, there'll be more pressure for them to actually join export controls. So it's really interesting you watch. Sometimes I think some other countries are happy to be extraterritorially controlled because then they can tell China, we didn't do this, we were forced to do it, don't attack us. But China has also been very explicit with threats to Japan and Korea and other countries of here's what's going to happen if you join the United States. So they're in a really tough bind. I think we have maybe time for one last extremely short question.
I'll try to be very brief, but as we know, Korea and Japan both have a lot of experience with industrial policy and a lot of success in that space. So I'm just wondering, with moving towards more innovative industries, what policy levers, or if you could just mention one specific policy mechanism, has been introduced or created to try and actually facilitate this growth in AI? Because you've all mentioned regulation, to regulate or not regulate, but I'm wondering if there's like a subsidy program or something similar like that. Thank you.
So each of you can mention one mechanism, and then I'll go to the end.
One mechanism, well, it's not regulating. This is soft law I would like to consider, because I'm focusing on AI ethics part, so I also mentioned about that. If you participating like those kind of AI ethics alliance, then you may have to join those kind of forum with the government. That could be those SME have a big chance to announce their name to public actually, yeah.
Yeah, so with the AI Framework Act I mentioned earlier, there's a soft law and the hard law. There's a it's mixed now. So I'd emphasize we should expand the soft law part more, promotion.
I can say that Japanese has a long history of the industrial policy, and the point I can say is a close relationship with the government and the industries. And based on this AI Act, so now government is creating the new AI basic plan. And this week, Prime Minister Takaichi has announced to create a growth strategy, on which first priority is AI and semiconductor.
Yeah. Thank you all for listening. I learned a ton from this presentation, all of the speakers. So let's all give them a round of applause and move to the next panel.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, panelists. That was fantastic. So we have a 15-minute break, and then we'll reconvene promptly at 11:15 for the panel, The Geopolitics of Computing Power. So see you back here soon.